Drop and give me 50. Mitchell, looks like you need the extra conditioning. Drill Sergeant Brent Gallagher stood over Private Andre Mitchell in the midday sun at Fort Braxton, his muscular frame casting a shadow across the training ground as Andre hit the dirt in his green fatigues and combat boots. While the other recruits grabbed water during their scheduled break, Andre was forced to continue push-ups on the scorching asphalt. Gallagher's voice carried across the base as he made a show of the punishment, his short-sleeved uniform spotless, while Andre's became caked with dust and sweat. "Some boys just aren't cut out for real military service," he announced to the gathering crowd of soldiers. "Maybe you should consider a different career path, one more suited to your background." What Gallagher couldn't have imagined was that his performance was being watched through binoculars from a base office window by a two-star general who had been quietly investigating reports of discrimination and who recognized the name Mitchell immediately. Welcome to Frost Folktales. This is where we tell the stories of those who were underestimated, dismissed, and targeted, yet chose courage over silence. If these stories move you, subscribe and be part of a community that refuses to let them fade into the background. The neon lights of the training facility cast shadows on Andre Mitchell's face as his arms gave up. 37, 38, 39. The Gallagher's predator-like circling of her prey conditioned. Words were not spoken through gritted teeth. The other recruits, dressed in dry and comfortable green combat uniforms, stood at the formation nearby watching their soldier go through punishment that was obviously disguised as training. Private Elijah Santos shifted uncomfortably in his green fatigues and combat boots, the unfairness of the situation eating at him. "Drill Sergeant, sir," Santos called out, his voice cutting through the afternoon air. "Private Mitchell completed the same morning exercises as the rest of us. Why is he being singled out for additional conditioning?" Gallagher's head snapped toward Santos, his pale eyes narrowing dangerously. "Did I ask for your input, Santos?" The drill sergeant's muscular frame tensed as he stepped closer to the young recruit. "In the Army, we don't coddle weakness. Some people need extra motivation to reach the standards that come naturally to others." His gaze swept meaningfully across the formation of predominantly white recruits before settling back on Andre, who had reached 45 push-ups and was struggling to continue. The coded language wasn't lost on anyone present. Andre's jaw clenched as he pushed through the burning sensation in his muscles, determined not to give Gallagher the satisfaction of seeing him break. 46, 47, 48. Each number came out stronger than the last, his voice carrying a defiance that only seemed to irritate the drill sergeant further. "That's enough conversation from the peanut gallery," Gallagher barked, his attention returning to Santos. "Since you're so concerned about Mitchell's treatment, you can join him for kitchen duty tonight. Extra shifts build character, something both of you could apparently use." As Andre did his 50th push-up and stood up, the blazing sun overhead shone down on him relentlessly. The green uniform clung to him, soaked with perspiration and dirt, as he stood at attention. His combat boots bore scrapes from the concrete sidewalk, but he maintained a stiff back, proud in his humiliation. Gallagher went back to Andre and lowered his voice so the formation could just about hear him. "Mitchell, you know that I've been watching you since day one. I can't shake off the feeling that you think too highly of yourself. It could be something about your mannerisms that infer that you think you should get treated as any other." The drill sergeant's words were full of venom. "In my experience, soldiers like you require a reminder of who is in charge." The other recruits exchanged uncomfortable glances, the tension on the training ground thick enough to cut with a knife. Andre kept his eyes fixed straight ahead, his face a mask of controlled composure, even as rage burned in his chest. "Yes, sir," he responded, his voice steady despite the injustice of the situation. "Since you clearly need more structure in your day, Mitchell, you'll report to kitchen duty at 0500 hours tomorrow, 2 hours before the rest of your unit." Gallagher's announcement drew murmurs from the formation, "And after evening chow, you'll take the midnight watch shift." Maybe some extra responsibility will help you develop the discipline that seems to be lacking. Andre clenched his fists at his sides, but his voice didn't rise. Affirmative, sir. After a successful formation, the recruits dispersed to the barracks. Santos walked alongside Andre across the grounds of the base, and with the sun up in the open sky, still shone in the afternoon. His green uniform began to dry as he walked. On the other hand, the humiliation of being punished publicly would never leave him. "Wow, that was really out of the line," said Santos as they reached the entrance of the barracks. "This morning the same exercises were done by everyone. You were in fact one of the quickest through the obstacle course." Andre looked around to ensure that we were not being eavesdropped on. "The exercises are not what's important, Elijah. There's a different issue regarding this situation that we're both aware of." General Marcus Mitchell wore his service uniform as he sat behind his mahogany desk under the afternoon sunlight filtering through the large window of his corner office at the Pentagon 200 miles away. A stack of papers sits on his desk every day. These are files and reports on almost anything you can imagine. However, one caught his eye. Labeled as Fort Braxton Training Irregularities, the folder had a chronology of complaints by multiple sources about the discriminatory treatment of trainees. Marcus Mitchell served the military for 25 years as a decorated general. While his physique was well known, so was the respect he had in the armed forces. However, his reputation as a fair and above-board officer led to him being assigned to sensitive investigations. The name which stood out to him as he sifted through witness statements and incident reports was Private Andre Mitchell, such as it had a physical effect. The general trembled slightly as he read the particulars. Numerous reports of harsh punishment, bias, and a hostile training environment involved his younger brother. Marcus became so proud when Andre decided on enlistment, having joined the family military legacy. Both their father, who had fought in Vietnam, and Marcus had spent their whole adult lives in uniform. By choosing to join, Andre was continuing a family tradition of honor and service. Now, as I read those reports, I could feel a cold fury growing in Marcus. The documentation presented a systematic picture of harassment against his brother and maybe other minority recruits. The complaints revealed repeated references to Drill Sergeant Brent Gallagher, who was described as using hidden language and using punishment to target certain soldiers. Marcus grabbed his secured phone and called a number he already knew off by heart. Colonel Vivian Marsh, commander of Fort Braxton Base, picked up on the second ring. General Mitchell speaking to Colonel Marsh. "I must arrange for an inspection visit to Fort Braxton in the next 72 hours. "Yes, good sir." "What prompted this sudden inspection, if I may ask?" "There have been some concerning reports about training protocols and recruit treatment. Nothing official yet, but I want to observe your operations firsthand before any formal investigation begins." As Marcus Mitchell ended the call, he stared out his office window at the bustling activity of the Pentagon courtyard below. Military personnel in various uniforms moved with purpose across the grounds, the afternoon sun casting long shadows between the buildings. He thought about Andre enduring harassment and discrimination while trying to serve his country with honor. The general opened another secure line and dialed a trusted colleague in the Inspector General's office. "Sarah, it's Marcus Mitchell. I need to discuss a potential investigation at Fort Braxton, but it needs to be handled with complete discretion initially." Back at Fort Braxton, Andre Mitchell stood alone in the massive kitchen facility, the overhead fluorescent lights casting harsh illumination across stainless steel surfaces and industrial equipment. It was nearly midnight, and he had already completed his assigned kitchen duties. Now he faced 4 hours of watch duty, patrolling the base perimeter while other recruits slept peacefully in their bunks. His green fatigues had wrinkles from the day's work. His combat boots made ringing noises as he went between the prep stations to see that everything was cleaned for the morning shift. The additional responsibilities weren't really for training but punishment. Nonetheless, Andre applied the same level of commitment to each as he did to everything else in the army. As Andre stepped out into the cool night air to begin his watch rounds, he looked up at the stars above Fort Braxton. He joined the army to serve his country and follow the tradition of serving his family. Marcus, the protagonist's elder brother, was an inspiring personality. He showed how one could achieve excellence and integrity. At that moment, Andre wasn't aware that General Marcus Mitchell was finalizing plans for an unannounced inspection to reveal the discrimination present at Fort Braxton. The investigation was about to be launched. One of the Army's most respected generals was going to place Drill Sergeant Gallagher's pattern of abuse under a professional microscope. Justice had begun to flow, and in 48 hours, a general would arrive at Fort Braxton. The general would protect his brother at all cost and change a system that had allowed discrimination to continue for such a long time. With the dawn of the new day, harsh glare of Fort Braxton Barracks fluorescent lights lit up the cement floor. Private Andre Mitchell had only managed about 3 hours of sleep when the whistle of Drill Sergeant Brent Gallagher pierced his eardrums while he was in his narrow bunk. Within moments, 40 other recruits sprang to their feet, but the cold blue eyes of Gallagher were already focused on Andre like a predator who has found his prey. "Mitchell?" Gallagher's voice echoed throughout the barracks. "Since you think you deserve special treatment, you will carry the lead pack today." He pointed towards a monstrous backpack that appeared much heavier than the regular one. The standard green canvas was overly stuffed with more items than the allowance, bulging at the seams. Andre tugged on his olive green training shirt and cargo pants, jaw tight with determination. The humiliation he faced yesterday was incident, but a look in Gallagher's pale eyes said it was no coincidence. The long-sleeved uniform of the drill sergeant was shining in the morning sun. His muscular frame towered over the recruits as he handed out gear. He obviously played favorites. Private Elijah Santos, a lean young man with worried dark eyes, stepped forward hesitantly. "Sergeant, shouldn't pack weights be standardized for training purposes?" Gallagher wheeled around, his face flushing red above his starched collar. "Did I ask for input from the peanut gallery, Santos? Mitchell here volunteered for extra responsibility. Didn't you, Mitchell?" The question dripped with false sincerity and barely contained hostility. Andre worked hard to carry the heavy load that was his. The pack straps dug through his shirt into his shoulders. "Certainly, Sergeant. Impressive. Now let's see if you can keep up with real soldiers." The bright sun rose over the training grounds of Fort Braxton in the morning march. While the other recruits struggled with 40-pound packs, Andre fought beneath what felt like 70 pounds. He remained in formation as sweat streamed down his face, and his green shirt became wet just 1 mile in. He heard his fellow recruits talk behind his back. "This isn't right," Santos said to the recruit next to him. "He's singling him out." "Keep your voice down," the recruit said. "You want to be next?" Sergeant Owen Callahan, a drill instructor with over 20 years of service and gray in hair, watched the march from the rear. His face creased into a frown as he focused on the struggle of Andre. Callahan had witnessed discrimination before, but undoubtedly nothing like this. He produced a pen and small notebook and began documenting what he was seeing. Callahan noticed the clear difference in weight when it came to the packs of Mitchell and Gallagher, and the overt harassment of Gallagher. When they reached the obstacle course, Gallagher's systematic torture continued. "Mitchell, you get 2 minutes for the rope climb. Everyone else gets 5. He clicked his stopwatch with theatrical precision. "Maybe where you come from, they don't understand military precision, but here we have standards." The coded language wasn't lost on anyone present. Andre attacked the rope with fierce determination, his muscular arms pulling him upward despite the exhaustion from the weighted march. He completed the climb in 90 seconds, landing with practiced grace that spoke to his natural athleticism. Gallagher's face darkened with frustration. "Barely adequate." Again, drill sergeant. He finished well under time, Callahan interjected, stepping forward. His short-sleeved uniform revealed muscular arms crossed over his chest in disapproval. Are you questioning my training methods, Sergeant Callahan? Just observing consistency in standards. Drill Sergeant Gallagher. You could feel the bottled-up tension between the two teachers in the morning air. Gallagher relented, yet somehow his eyes promised revenge. All right, Mitchell, you show the whole team how do it right. 5 more. As Andre repeated the exercise under the blazing sun, Corporal Derek Simmons approached Gallagher with a cruel smile. Simmons was younger than the drill sergeant, with pale skin and close-cropped blonde hair beneath his military cap. His green fatigue shirt stretched across a lean frame as he whispered something in Gallagher's ear that made both men chuckle darkly. Simmons has an excellent point, Gallagher announced loudly. Mitchell, since you're so eager to show off, you can lead every exercise today, double time. The pattern continued through weapons training, where Andre received a rifle that had been deliberately tampered with, causing it to jam repeatedly. During mess hall inspection, his bunk was torn apart for imaginary infractions, while white recruits with obviously messy quarters were passed without comment. Each incident was witnessed by increasingly uncomfortable fellow soldiers who began to understand they were seeing something far worse than tough training. With trembling fingers, Andre dialed his brother's number that evening in the communications room when he had his turn to use the phone. The buzzing fluorescent lights above marked the atmosphere while he waited for Marcus. Andre? How's training going, little bro? Andre almost lost it when he heard the warmth in Marcus Mitchell's voice. General Marcus Mitchell was seated in his large Pentagon office, in his dress uniform, after a long day of briefings. It's challenging, Andre said carefully, aware that military phones could be monitored. Some of the instructors have very high standards, particularly focused on certain recruits. Marcus's jaw tightened. 20 years of military experience had taught him to read between the lines. Are you receiving fair treatment, Andre? I'm handling it, learning a lot about leadership styles and institutional culture. Andre's coded words painted a clear picture for his experienced brother. I see. Well, I've been thinking about conducting some base inspections. Fort Braxton might benefit from a general's perspective on training protocols. That would be educational for everyone involved. After the call ended, Marcus immediately began making arrangements. He contacted his aide-de-camp and authorized a surprise inspection tour of Fort Braxton's training facilities. Something was very wrong, and his little brother was suffering for it. Meanwhile, in his private quarters, Sergeant Owen Callahan reviewed his growing documentation of Gallagher's discriminatory behavior. His notebook contained detailed observations of unequal treatment, coded racist language, and systematic harassment. As a career military man, Callahan understood the importance of evidence in fighting institutional corruption. The next morning brought fresh humiliations. During combat training, Gallagher paired Andre with the largest, most aggressive recruit, while ensuring other black soldiers faced similar disadvantages. When Andre not only held his own but dominated his opponent, Gallagher's frustration became visible to everyone present. Lucky shot, Mitchell. Let's see you handle some real competition. Gallagher personally entered the sparring circle, his muscular frame intimidating in his long-sleeved training uniform. What followed was less training exercise than personal vendetta. Gallagher attacked with unnecessary force, clearly intending to humiliate rather than instruct. But Andre's natural skill and determination shone through. He absorbed punishment, learned from each exchange, and gradually began matching the drill sergeant's aggression with superior technique. The gathered recruits watched in stunned silence as their tormented fellow soldier held his own against the abusive instructor. Private Santos found himself holding his breath because while he admired Andre's skill, he feared the retaliation that would follow. When Gallagher realized Andre still was standing after the exercise, the drill sergeant's mask slipped at last. "You think you're tough, little boy? We'll see how tough you are when I'm done with your training." A clear undertone of racial awareness was present now. Even the newest recruits, the most naive people, understood that they were witnessing systematic persecution based merely on skin color. Corporal Simmons stepped forward eagerly, sensing an opportunity to curry favor with his superior. "Drill Sergeant, maybe Mitchell needs some specialized attention. Extra duties, focused training sessions." "Excellent suggestion, Corporal." "Mitchell, report to the quartermaster for sanitation duty after evening chow. Double shifts until further notice." As the day's official training ended, Sergeant Callahan approached Andre privately. The veteran instructor's weathered face showed genuine concern as he spoke quietly near the equipment shed. "I want you to understand, son, that what you see going on here isn't a military training. A good soldier is someone who does not choose recruits based on color." Andre looked at Callahan in surprise and gratitude. "Thank you for that, Sergeant. I am taking notes of everything I see. One day there will be proof of what really happened here." Later that night, while Andre scrubbed floorboards under the powerful gaze of Simmons, something shifted in him. The abuse was systematic and institutional and designed to crush him. But the longer it went on, the more he fed off it, believing he was growing stronger. It only made him more determined to prove his worth. No amount of discrimination could break his will to serve his country. Unknown to any of them, General Marcus Mitchell was already en route to Fort Braxton, his staff car cutting through the night toward a confrontation that would expose the ugly truth of what passed for training under Drill Sergeant Gallagher's command. The pattern had emerged clearly now. This wasn't about military discipline or high standards. This was about racial hatred dressed in the uniform of the United States Army, and it was about to face the full force of military justice. When Andre finally collapsed into his bunk near midnight, unable to bear the pressure any longer, little did he know that help was coming from the very top. Tomorrow would come with fresh humiliations, new problems, and more abuse. However, it will mark the beginning of the end for anyone who believed themselves fit to hide their racists under military power. The morning sun cast long shadows across Fort Braxton as General Marcus Mitchell stepped out of his olive green military vehicle. At 45, Marcus had earned his rank through unwavering dedication and tactical brilliance, but today his mission was deeply personal, despite its official veneer. Colonel Vivienne Marsh, her auburn hair was pulled back in regulation style, and her smile carried the practiced warmth of a career officer greeting a superior. "Welcome to Fort Braxton, General Mitchell," she said as she shook his hand. "We are pleased to have you conduct this inspection." Marcus shook her hand before looking at the training grounds beyond her shoulder. "I appreciate your assistance, Colonel Marsh. I see you're doing brilliant work here." "We always believe in doing our best for the training," Vivienne replied, pointing to the barracks. "Would you like to see them in morning drills? My drill sergeants have high standards." Marcus noticed the irony in her words but nodded professionally. "That would be great. I would like to observe your techniques." While he looked around the concrete courtyard, Marcus's trained mind cataloged everything. The base was kept in proper condition with regimented soldiers and a disciplined atmosphere. Beneath the sheen, he was aware that corruption lay like an infection. They went to the big training area where recruits are assembled in formation. Marcus saw Andre right away, among the green uniforms and matching caps. The younger brother stood at attention, his shoulders square, but Marcus noticed the tightness that signaled he was always alert. The equipment shed's door opened, and out stepped Drill Sergeant Brent Gallagher, his green long-sleeve uniform stretching over his bulkiness. The heat of the day had already caught up with his pale face, and as his small eyes scanned the recruits, it did so with the suspicion of a predator. Gallagher shouted, "Listen up, maggots," as he surveyed the soldiers' training. "We're going to run the obstacle course today. Some of you might think that you are special, and the standards do not apply to you. But let me remind you that mediocrity has no place in this man's army. Marcus felt his jaw tighten as he noticed Gallagher's unbroken regard for Andre. Gallagher's tone turned deliberately authoritative as he called out, "Mitchell at the focus point." Andre walked forward in a military-like manner with a professional-looking face. Marcus admired the discipline of his brother, but he felt anger in his heart. "You'll be demonstrating proper form for your fellow recruits," Gallagher announced. "Can't have anyone thinking they can coast through my training program." Colonel Marsh leaned toward Marcus, speaking in low tones. "Sergeant Gallagher is one of our most experienced drill instructors. He's particularly effective at identifying potential and pushing recruits to exceed their limitations." Marcus nodded noncommittally while watching Gallagher direct Andre toward the obstacle course. The course itself was standard military fare: rope climbs, wall traversals, crawling sections, and balance beams. Nothing appeared overtly dangerous, but Marcus knew the devil lay in the details. "Begin," Gallagher commanded. Andre attacked the course with impressive athleticism, his muscled frame navigating each obstacle with fluid efficiency. His green uniform darkened with perspiration as he maintained a pace that would challenge even seasoned soldiers. "Faster, Mitchell," Gallagher shouted. "My grandmother could complete this course quicker, and she's been dead for 10 years. Maybe you're just not cut out for military service. Maybe you should consider career alternatives more suited to your background." The coded language hit Marcus like a physical blow. He'd heard similar phrases throughout his own military career, the subtle implications designed to undermine confidence while maintaining plausible deniability. But watching it directed at his brother transformed abstract knowledge into visceral fury. Andre completed the course in what Marcus recognized as excellent time, but Gallagher's expression suggested dissatisfaction. "Unacceptable," the drill sergeant declared. Again, Colonel Marsh shifted uncomfortably beside Marcus. "Sergeant Gallagher does emphasize repetition as a learning tool," she offered weakly. "Instructive methodology," Marcus replied, his voice carefully neutral while his hands clenched behind his back. Andre ran the course again, his performance remaining consistently strong despite growing fatigue. Other recruits watched with expressions ranging from sympathy to fear, and Marcus noted how none dared voice objections to the obvious targeting. Again, Gallagher commanded when Andre finished his second run. This time, Private Elijah Santos stepped forward slightly, his olive complexion flushed with indignation. His green uniform was pristine compared to Andre's sweat-soaked clothing, and his youthful face showed the moral conflict of witnessing injustice. "Sergeant, Private Mitchell has completed the course twice in excellent time," Elijah said, his voice steady despite the obvious risk he was taking. Gallagher's pale face reddened further as he whirled toward Elijah. "Did I ask for your opinion, Santos? Did anyone request input from the peanut gallery?" "No, Sergeant, but—" "Drop and give me 50 push-ups," Gallagher snarled, "and Mitchell runs the course again. Maybe seeing his buddy suffer will motivate him to perform at acceptable levels." Marcus watched Elijah drop into push-up position while Andre positioned himself at the course starting line once more. The systematic nature of the abuse was becoming crystal clear, and Marcus began mentally cataloging evidence for his eventual report. "I should mention," Colonel Marsh said quietly, "we've had excellent graduation rates under current training protocols. Our methods, while demanding, produce exceptional soldiers." "I'm sure they do," Marcus replied, though his attention remained fixed on Andre's third traverse of the obstacle course. After Andre finished his last lap, he was all sweat in his green outfit, and his breathing was getting heavy. Other recruits looked on in admiration and concern, but not even this made Gallagher happy, who looked not too pleased. "That's okay," said the drill sergeant. "Return to your places." After the morning drill was over, and when the recruits broke away for other training activities, Marcus noted everything he saw. There was a pattern. Andre was over-scrutinized, over-physically tried, and over-verbally abused, all disguised as a motivation. "Impressive training regimen," Marcus told Colonel Marsh as they walked toward the administrative building. "I'd like to conduct some private interviews with your personnel, get their perspectives on training effectiveness." "Of course," Vivian agreed readily. "I'll arrange for a private conference room and have soldiers report to you throughout the day." An hour later, Marcus sat across from Private Elijah Santos in a sparse conference room illuminated by bright overhead fluorescent lighting. The young soldier's green uniform was freshly pressed, but his dark eyes showed the weariness of someone navigating dangerous territory. "Relax, Private," Marcus said gently. "This conversation is confidential, and I'm simply gathering information about training methods and base culture." Elijah's posture remained rigid. "Yes, General. How would you characterize the treatment of recruits during training?" Marcus asked, keeping his tone neutral and professional. "Training is challenging but fair, General," Elijah replied, the words sounding rehearsed. Marcus leaned forward slightly. "I observed this morning's drill session. It appeared that Private Mitchell received additional attention from Sergeant Gallagher." Elijah's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Sergeant Gallagher pushes everyone to excel, sir." "Of course," Marcus agreed. "But in your observation, does he push everyone equally?" The question hung in the air like smoke from a battlefield. Elijah glanced toward the door, then back at Marcus, clearly wrestling with competing loyalties and fears. "Private Santos," Marcus said softly, "I'm not here to create problems for anyone. I'm here to ensure that all soldiers receive appropriate treatment and training opportunities." Something in Marcus's tone seemed to reach Elijah, and his defensive posture softened slightly. "General, I've noticed that certain soldiers seem to face additional challenges during training," he admitted carefully. "Private Mitchell, Private Johnson, Private Washington, they often receive extra attention that other recruits don't experience." "What kind of extra attention?" "Additional physical requirements, longer duty assignments, more frequent disciplinary actions for minor infractions," Elijah explained, his voice gaining strength as he spoke. "Yesterday, Private Mitchell was assigned to scrub kitchen floors because his bunk wasn't made to Sergeant Gallagher's standards. But I've seen beds in worse condition that received no comment." Marcus nodded encouragingly. "Have you witnessed any verbal interactions that seemed inappropriate?" Elijah hesitated again, then seemed to reach a decision. "Sergeant Gallagher sometimes makes comments about soldiers' backgrounds, their suitability for military service, their cultural characteristics. He uses language that sounds professional but feels different." "Can you provide specific examples?" He told Private Mitchell that maybe military service wasn't compatible with his natural inclinations. He suggested that Private Washington might be more comfortable in civilian employment that matched his heritage. These comments are always made publicly, in front of other recruits. Marcus felt his anger building, but maintained his professional demeanor. "Have you reported these observations through proper channels?" "No, General," Elijah admitted. "Private Mitchell asked us not to make waves. He said he could handle the situation and didn't want anyone else to face retaliation." "Retaliation?" "Soldiers who speak up often find themselves facing additional scrutiny, extra duties, negative performance reviews," Elijah explained. "The message is clear: keep quiet or face consequences." When Elijah left, Marcus sat in the conference room, absorbing what he had just heard. The systematic way the soldier was getting discriminated against was something his brother was able to see now. Moreover, he only kept doing this more. He was interrupted by a knock on the door. Sergeant Owen Callahan strode in, his features telling the tale of more than 20 years' service. His work uniform is green long sleeves with ribbons and medals, while his hair has gray and is cut regulation. "General Mitchell, I requested this meeting because I have information relevant to your inspection," Owen said without preamble. "Please have a seat, Sergeant." Owen placed a manila folder on the table between them. "I've been documenting incidents of discriminatory behavior by Drill Sergeant Gallagher over the past 6 months. As a senior NCO, I felt obligated to maintain records in case formal complaints were ever filed. Marcus opened the folder to find detailed notes, dates, times, and descriptions of multiple incidents involving Andre and other minority recruits. The documentation was thorough, professional, and damning. "This is extensive work, Sergeant. Why haven't you filed formal complaints?" Owen's expression darkened. "I've raised concerns with my immediate supervisors, but they've been dismissed as personality conflicts or training differences. Sergeant Gallagher has connections, friends in administrative positions who protect him from scrutiny. However, you kept on documenting incidents." "I thought someone had to," Owen said simply. "These young soldiers deserve better than this deal, and I figured someone will eventually ask the right questions." Marcus spent the next hour going through Owen's documentation. Each incident documented was further proof against Gallagher. Owen was tiring of his stupid standards and unusual punishments. Plus, his verbal tirades were used on minority recruits as a matter of course. As afternoon training began, Marcus positioned himself where he could observe without being noticed. Andre was running the obstacle course again, this time alone, while other recruits rested in the shade. Gallagher stood nearby, shouting criticism and demanding faster completion times. "Move it, Mitchell. This isn't social hour. Some people might be satisfied with mediocre performance, but in my army, everyone meets the same standards." Marcus watched his brother push through obvious exhaustion, completing the course repeatedly while Gallagher found fault with each run. Other soldiers watched nervously, and Marcus realized they were witnessing not just individual abuse, but institutional intimidation. Private Elijah Santos approached Gallagher during Andre's 5th consecutive run through the course. "Sergeant, Private Mitchell has been running the course for 40 minutes. Maybe he could take a brief water break?" Gallagher's face contorted with rage. "Are you his personal advocate, Santos? Are you questioning my training methods?" "No, Sergeant. I just think you think too much," Gallagher interrupted. "Join Mitchell on the course. Maybe you both need extra conditioning." Marcus watched Elijah comply without further protest, though his jaw was set with suppressed anger. The scene crystallized everything wrong with the training environment: abuse masquerading as discipline, intimidation silencing witnesses, and systematic targeting of soldiers based on race. As the day went on, Marcus took evidence from other recruits who were telling corroborative stories of discrimination and abuse. By evening, the investigator had enough evidence to destroy Gallagher's career and highlight the failures of the system which enabled such behavior. But watching Andre endure continued harassment while maintaining perfect military bearing filled Marcus with conflicting emotions. His pride in his brother's strength warred with fury at the injustice, and his duty as a general conflicted with his instincts as a protective older brother. Tomorrow, he would begin the formal process of bringing justice to Fort Braxton. Tonight, he would struggle with the knowledge that his brother continued to suffer while he maintained his professional distance. The investigation was gathering momentum, and soon the shadows would give way to the harsh light of accountability. As the morning training session at Fort Braxton entered its 3rd hour, the morning sun beat down mercilessly overhead. The thermometer mounted on the observation tower at the training field read 34 degrees, but the heat radiating from the asphalt felt as though it could melt steel. Drill Sergeant Brent Gallagher stood in the shade of the equipment shed. Despite the stifling heat, his military uniform was spotless. His cold blue eyes followed every move of young recruit Andre Mitchell as he completed the course, which included rubber obstacles, rope climbs, and wall climbing challenges for the 5th time in a row. While the other recruits were given a water break every 30 minutes, Andre Mitchell hadn't been allowed to stop for over an hour. "Faster, Mitchell!" Gallagher's voice sliced through the humid air like the crack of a whip. "Your people must be natural athletes, right? Stop disgracing your heritage and show me what you're made of." Andre Mitchell's green training t-shirt clung to his sweat-soaked muscular body as he scaled the final wall. His camouflage pants were caked in dirt and sweat, but his resolve remained unshaken. The young soldier's breath came in gasps, but he maintained his military posture as he neared the finish line. From his hidden position near the administrative building, General Marcus Mitchell watched through binoculars. His jaw was clenched with anger he could barely control. Every instinct screamed at him to storm onto the field and put an end to this torture. But he forced himself to remain hidden. The investigation required patience, even as he watched his younger brother suffer. Private Elijah Santos finished his obstacle course and immediately noticed Andre Mitchell swaying slightly on his feet. The Latin American recruit's t-shirt was soaked through with sweat. "Corporal Gallagher," Elijah called out respectfully, "don't we all need a water break? The heat index is reaching dangerous levels." Gallagher's head snapped toward Elijah like a predator locking onto its prey. "Did I ask for your meteorological expertise, Santos? Mitchell stops when I tell him to. He needs to build character, something that seems to be missing from his genetic makeup." The other recruits exchanged anxious glances. Johnson, a stocky young man from Ohio, stepped forward in his standard green training t-shirt and camouflage pants. "Sergeant, Andre Mitchell has been running non-stop for 90 minutes. According to military protocol." "Military protocol?" Gallagher's laugh was as cold as ice. "I am the protocol on this field. Mitchell, you're going to run again. And this time, instead of that pathetic display you just put on, I want to see some real effort." Andre Mitchell's vision blurred slightly as he looked at the starting line. His body was screaming for water, rest, and relief from this brutal heat. But he straightened his shoulders and nodded. "Yes, Drill Sergeant." "That's what I thought," Gallagher said sarcastically. "Some of these kids have what it takes to be real soldiers. The others are just taking up space and wasting taxpayers' money on a training they'll never be worthy of completing." Marcus Mitchell's hands trembled as he gripped the binoculars tighter. The veiled racism in Gallagher's words was glaringly obvious to anyone paying attention. His brother wasn't being strengthened as military training intended. He was being systematically worn down. Andre Mitchell began his 6th lap on the obstacle course. His movements were now noticeably slow. His usual fluid grace had been replaced by the mechanical motions of a body pushed beyond its limits. Halfway through the rubber course, his foot caught on one of the obstacles. He stumbled, but regained his balance and continued forward by sheer willpower. "You're as clumsy as expected," Gallagher shouted. "If you'd spent more time training instead of complaining, you'd have the coordination God grants a real soldier." The rope climb was nearly impossible. Andre Mitchell's hands, slippery with sweat and dehydrated, struggled to grip the rope. He slid back down a few feet 3 times before continuing upward. The other recruits watched in silent horror as their comrade struggled against his body's rebellion. Disaster struck during the wall climbing section. Andre Mitchell approached the 12-foot wooden obstacle with determination, but his strength gave out halfway up. His grip loosened, his legs buckled, and he collapsed to the ground. He couldn't get back up. "Mitchell is faking it," Gallagher shouted immediately, striding toward the soldier who had fallen to the ground. "Get up, you pathetic rookie. I've seen better acting in elementary school plays." Elijah Santos broke ranks without permission and ran to Andre Mitchell's side. Beneath the soldier's dark skin, his complexion was pale. His breathing was shallow and rapid. "His fever is sky high. It's heat stroke." "It's all nonsense," Gallagher grumbled. "He's just looking for an excuse to quit because the training's too tough for his weak build." "Sergeant, he needs medical attention immediately," insisted Johnson, joining Elijah beside Andre Mitchell's motionless body. The other recruits began gathering around their fallen comrade, forming a protective circle. Private Williams, a tall young woman from Texas wearing a training t-shirt, knelt down and checked Andre Mitchell's pulse. "His heart rate is through the roof. This isn't an act." "Everyone step back," Gallagher ordered, Mitchell will stand up when he's ready to end this demonstration. I won't allow my recruits to think they can fake medical emergencies to avoid hard work. No way. The voice belonged to Captain Lydia Holt. The middle-aged woman was wearing her military jacket, and as she made her way through the ranks of the new recruits, a look of anger was etched on her face. She immediately began assessing Andre Mitchell's condition, checking his vital signs and examining his symptoms. This soldier is suffering from severe heat stroke. Someone call an ambulance right away. Captain, I must object, Gallagher interjected. This recruit has a history of using questionable medical claims to avoid strenuous exercises. Captain Holt's eyes blazed as he lifted his head from Andre Mitchell's unconscious body. Drill Sergeant, this soldier's body temperature is dangerously high. His skin is sweaty, and his pulse is rapid and weak. These are the classic symptoms of heat exhaustion progressing toward heat stroke. Are you seriously claiming he brought these symptoms on himself? The medical officer began administering first aid while barking orders at the recruits. They needed cold water, ice packs from the supply shed, and shade in an enclosed area. Rather than watching their friend suffer, the recruits moved gratefully, finally able to help him. Within minutes, they had set up a makeshift medical station while Captain Holt worked to stabilize Andre Mitchell's condition. Marcus Mitchell watched the unfolding situation through his binoculars. He was caught in a conflict between his military training and his instinct for brotherhood. Every fiber of his being wanted to reveal himself and ruin Gallagher's career right then and there. Instead, knowing that a systematic takedown would be fairer than emotional revenge, he forced himself to document everything he witnessed. The ambulance arrived within 10 minutes, but Captain Holt's emergency intervention had already begun to lower Andre Mitchell's body temperature. As the medical personnel prepared to transport him to the base hospital, Andre Mitchell regained consciousness briefly. "I can finish the course," he murmured in a weak voice, trying to sit up. "You're going to the hospital," Captain Holt said in a firm yet gentle voice. "You pushed your body beyond safe limits, and this isn't your fault." After the ambulance left, Captain Holt turned to Gallagher, barely containing his anger. "Training Sergeant, I'll be preparing a comprehensive incident report on this training session. Refusing to take a water break in extreme heat violates all of our safety protocols." "I was conducting legitimate military training," Gallagher replied defensively. "If Mitchell can't handle the heat, maybe he isn't fit for military service." "What you were conducting was dangerous and potentially amounted to criminal negligence," Captain Holt retorted. "I've been treating heat-related injuries for 15 years, and I know the difference between legitimate training stress and abuse." As the medical officer left to write his report, Gallagher directed his anger at the remaining recruits. His face flushed with the shame and anger of having been questioned by a senior officer. "Well, congratulations," he snarled at the assembled soldiers. "Your friend's little show has cost all of you your afternoon leave. Thanks to Mitchell's little charade, you'll be spending your free time cleaning toilets and scrubbing floors." The injustice of the collective punishment sparked murmurs of discontent among the ranks. A few recruits exchanged glances that clearly expressed their growing anger at Gallagher's methods. 2 hours later, Marcus Mitchell was sitting in the office of Base Commander Colonel Vivienne Marsh. The distinguished woman was wearing her command uniform. Her dark hair was perfectly combed despite the day's heat. Her office was brightly lit by fluorescent lights on the ceiling and natural light streaming through large windows. "General Mitchell, what brings you here this afternoon?" Colonel Marsh asked with professional courtesy. "I hope your inspection is proceeding smoothly." "Actually, Colonel, I have some concerns I'd like to discuss regarding training protocols," Marcus replied carefully. "I've observed some methods that appear inconsistent with current military safety standards." Colonel Marsh leaned forward with interest. "What specifically concerns you, General?" "First, heat stroke prevention. Today, I witnessed a training accident involving a rookie soldier who suffered a heat stroke that could have been prevented with proper fluid intake protocols." "I heard about that incident," Captain Holt submitted a preliminary report recommending a review of Training Sergeant Gallagher's methods. Marcus Mitchell nodded thoughtfully. Perhaps a more comprehensive review of training practices would be beneficial. Heat-related casualties can end careers before they begin, and we need every qualified soldier we have. I completely agree, replied Colonel Marsh. Are you willing to oversee a comprehensive review of our training protocols? I would be honored to serve in that capacity, said Marcus, carefully concealing his personal interest in the investigation's outcome. When the meeting concluded, Marcus Mitchell felt a wave of hope wash over him. The formal investigation he had been preparing for so long was finally gaining institutional support. Meanwhile, elsewhere on the base, Major Theodore Banks noticed a disturbing pattern while reviewing personnel files. Over the past 6 months, 3 different black recruits had filed informal complaints regarding discriminatory treatment. All 3 complaints mentioned the same drill sergeant Brent Gallagher. The web of evidence was growing stronger, and Andre Mitchell's downfall had finally provided the catalyst needed to expose the long-standing systematic abuse at Fort Braxton. Justice would be served, but the battle was not yet over. As the fluorescent lights in Conference Room B cast sharp shadows across the polished table, General Marcus Mitchell was reviewing Captain Lydia Holt's medical report for the 3rd time. The official letterhead made everything concrete in a way his covert observations had failed to do. Heat stroke, dehydration, severe physical stress. The clinical language barely suppressed the anger building in his chest, but Marcus Mitchell forced himself to maintain the professional composure that had guided him throughout his 20-year military career. Colonel Vivienne Marsh entered the room. A serious expression was etched on her face as she sat down in the chair opposite the general. Behind her, Lieutenant Naomi Fletcher was carrying a stack of files. Despite the early hour, the top half of her green uniform was spotless. General Mitchell, I'd like to thank you for volunteering to oversee this investigation, Colonel Marsh began. Her voice was steady but nervous. Captain Holt's report raises serious concerns about the training protocols under the command of Drill Sergeant Gallagher. Marcus Mitchell nodded, carefully concealing his personal interest. Colonel, whenever the safety of any recruit is at risk, it becomes a base-wide issue. I've reviewed the initial documents and believe we need to conduct thorough interviews with all relevant personnel. Lieutenant Fletcher opened his files, revealing pages containing incident reports and witness statements. Sir, we've identified a few recruits who can provide statements regarding the matter. Private Santos has agreed to speak with you first. The door opened and Private Elijah Santos walked in. The wrinkles in his training t-shirt were clearly caused by tension. His dark eyes scanned the gathered officers before settling on General Mitchell's face. Marcus Mitchell recognized the fear in that gaze. It was the same expression he'd seen on his brother's face during their phone calls. Private Santos, please sit down, said Marcus Mitchell, keeping his voice deliberately calm and reassuring. You're not in trouble. We're just trying to understand the training environment under Sergeant Gallagher's supervision. Elijah shifted in his chair, his hands clenched tightly in his lap. Sir, I want to help, but I'm afraid this situation will come back to haunt me. Sergeant Gallagher has made it clear that he doesn't tolerate troublemaking recruits in the chain of command. This confession sent a chill through the room. Colonel Marsh leaned forward, his expression hardening. Private, I want you to understand that silencing witnesses is a serious offense. Military laws provide you with protection so you can report abuses without fear of retaliation. Ma'am, with all due respect, that protection isn't much use when you're doing push-ups in the mud at the crack of dawn because the sergeant thinks you have an attitude problem. Elijah replied, his voice growing stronger. Yes, that may be true. But I saw what he did to Private Mitchell, and I know that speaking up will make you the next target. That's exactly what I'm afraid of, Elijah said. Marcus Mitchell felt his jaw clench at the mention of his brother's name, but he maintained his professional composure. Tell me what you observed, Private, as much as you can recall, including the dates. Over the next 20 minutes, Elijah Santos painted a picture of systematic harassment, severe enough to make Marcus Mitchell's hands tremble with a rage he could barely control. Impossible physical standards applied only to black recruits. Coded language about urban backgrounds and cultural differences that appeared innocent to casual observers but clearly contained racial undertones. The way Gallagher isolated Andre Mitchell from the other recruits during meal and training drills. "The worst part, sir, is how he pretends to be helping," Elijah continued, his voice growing stronger with each revelation. "He says things like, 'I'm pushing you harder because the Army's standards are higher than the streets,' or 'You need to get rid of those bad habits you picked up at home.' To anyone listening, it sounds like motivation, but we all know what he really means." As Lieutenant Fletcher took detailed notes, the worry on Colonel Marsh's face grew. When Elijah finished his statement, Marcus Mitchell thanked him and asked him to call the next witness. Corporal Derek Simmons walked in with the air of someone who thought he was untouchable. His long-sleeved service uniform was immaculate, and his smile reflected the confidence of a man who believed he was among allies. Marcus Mitchell recognized this type immediately. He was the kind of soldier who turned a blind eye to abuse through deliberate ignorance and selective enforcement. "Corporal Simmons, we're looking into some concerns regarding the training methods in your unit," Marcus Mitchell began, carefully watching the man's reaction. "What can you tell me about Training Sergeant Gallagher's attitude toward the recruits?" Derek's smile didn't waver. "Sir, Sergeant Gallagher is one of the best trainers I've ever served with. He's tough but fair, and he gets results. Today's recruits are softer than previous generations, and sometimes they misinterpret firm leadership as something more than it is." "Have you observed any incidents where Sergeant Gallagher's methods might have been inappropriate?" asked Lieutenant Fletcher, resting his pen on his notebook. "No, ma'am, they're not inappropriate. Demanding, certainly, but that's what turns civilians into soldiers," Derek replied calmly. "If some recruits find the training too hard, perhaps they should reconsider their commitment to serving their country." Marcus Mitchell leaned back in his chair and studied the corporal's face. "What about the incident 3 days ago when Private Mitchell fainted on the obstacle course? Were you there?" Derek's composure wavered slightly. "Yes, sir, I was there. Private Mitchell couldn't handle the heat, and Corporal Gallagher was trying to push him to keep going. Sometimes you have to put in more effort than you think. Unfortunately, the private couldn't withstand that pressure." According to the medical report, Private Mitchell was suffering from severe dehydration and heat stroke. "Do you think training should have continued under those conditions?" The corporal shifted uneasily. "Sir, it's not always easy to distinguish between someone who's truly struggling and someone looking for an excuse to quit. Sergeant Gallagher has years of experience reading recruits." Lieutenant Fletcher looked up from his notes. "Corporal, did you hear Sergeant Gallagher make any comments during training about Private Mitchell's background or personal characteristics?" "I don't recall any specific comments beyond standard motivational techniques," Derek replied, though his eyes avoided direct contact with the officers. "Sergeant Gallagher treats all recruits according to their individual needs." Marcus Mitchell noted the contradictions in Derek's statement. The man was clearly lying, but his statements would serve as evidence of the culture of denial surrounding Gallagher's behavior. After escorting Corporal Simmons out of the room, Marcus Mitchell called in Corporal Owen Callahan. The seasoned drill sergeant entered the room with the bearing of a soldier who had served with honor for 15 years. His short-sleeved uniform was spotless, and his expression was serious yet resolute. "Sergeant Callahan, I heard you have some documents related to our investigation," said Marcus Mitchell. Owen nodded and placed a manila folder on the table. "Sir, I've been documenting the incidents for the past 2 months. At first, I thought I might be misinterpreting the situation, but the pattern has become too clear to ignore." When he opened the folder, pages containing handwritten notes, timestamps, and even small digital recordings appeared. "After witnessing some particularly disturbing interactions, I started carrying a pocket recorder," These recordings contain the exact words Corporal Gallagher spoke during several training sessions. Lieutenant Fletcher took the recordings, barely able to hide his excitement. "Sergeant, what motivated you to document these incidents?" "Ma'am, I've been training recruits for over a decade, and I know the difference between tough love and targeted harassment. What I observed violated every principle of fair and effective military training," Owen replied firmly. "When I tried to convey my concerns directly to Corporal Gallagher, he told me to mind my own business and focus on my own recruits." Marcus Mitchell felt a deep sense of gratitude toward the sergeant, knowing that speaking up required great courage. "Exactly what behaviors did you observe and document?" Over the next 30 minutes, Sergeant Callahan systematically presented evidence demonstrating the severity of Training Sergeant Gallagher's conduct. The records contained coded racist remarks, discriminatory task assignments, and verbal harassment disguised as motivation. The written documents revealed a pattern of harassment targeting black recruits that grew increasingly severe. Private First Class Andre Mitchell was the one subjected to the worst treatment. "Sir, the most concerning aspect is how systematic all of this appears," Owen concluded. "This isn't random abuse or a bad decision. It's deliberate, ongoing harassment rooted in racial bias, and it has created a toxic environment for many recruits." After thanking Corporal Callahan, Marcus Mitchell prepared for the day's most difficult meeting. When Andre Mitchell entered the conference room, Marcus's heart sank at the sight of his younger brother. Andre was wearing his training t-shirt, but the confident young man who had enlisted 6 months ago now looked worn down by weeks of systematic abuse. "Private Mitchell, please have a seat," said Marcus, trying to keep his voice professionally neutral. "We're investigating concerns regarding the training methods in your unit, and we'd like to hear about your experiences." Andre sat up straight in his chair, and Marcus recognized the stubborn pride that had defined his brother since childhood. "Sir, I want to serve my country with honor, and I am willing to undergo any training necessary to become an effective soldier." "Private, we are not questioning your loyalty or your resilience," Lieutenant Fletcher said gently. "We are examining whether the training you received meets appropriate standards of fairness and safety." For a moment, Andre's composure wavered, and Marcus saw the pain his brother carried alone. "Ma'am, Training Sergeant Gallagher made it clear that he doesn't consider me fit for military service. He told me repeatedly that people with a past like mine lack the qualities needed to serve with honor." These words struck Marcus like physical blows, but he forced himself to focus on the investigation. "Can you provide concrete examples of inappropriate comments or behavior?" Andre's testimony laid bare the full extent of the psychological warfare Gallagher had waged against him. Impossible standards, public humiliation, constant insinuations that his race made him inferior to the other recruits. Marcus listened as his brother recounted weeks of torment, maintaining the detached demeanor his rank demanded. "The hardest part isn't the physical punishment," Andre concluded, his voice tinged with emotion. "It's knowing that no matter how hard I work or how much I improve, Sergeant Gallagher will never consider me worthy of wearing this uniform." After Andre left, Lieutenant Fletcher reviewed his notes with Colonel Marsh and General Mitchell. "Sir, the evidence is crystal clear. There are witness statements, audio recordings, documented instances of discriminatory behavior, and clear violations of military conduct standards." Colonel Marsh shook his head as if he couldn't believe it. "How did I miss this? How could such systematic abuse have occurred under my command without my knowledge?" "Ma'am, Gallagher took care to conceal his actions and intimidate potential witnesses," Marcus replied. "However, the evidence gathered by Corporal Callahan makes the case undeniable." As the afternoon wore on, news of the investigation began to spread throughout the base. Marcus Mitchell received a report from Major Theodore Banks that Training Sergeant Gallagher had approached several recruits who had already given statements and appeared to be attempting to influence their future testimony. "General, "I recommend we place Corporal Gallagher under immediate surveillance," Lieutenant Fletcher advised. "Influencing witnesses will add serious charges to his current situation." Knowing that Gallagher's desperation would drive him to increasingly reckless behavior, Marcus Mitchell approved the surveillance. The web of lies and intimidation that had shielded the drill sergeant for months was finally unraveling, and justice was now within reach for Andre Mitchell. As the sun set over Fort Braxton and natural light streamed through the conference room windows, Marcus Mitchell was preparing for the confrontation that would finally bring the truth to light and protect his brother from further abuse. The administrative hearing room at Fort Braxton buzzed with tension as morning sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating the polished conference table where justice would finally be served. General Marcus Mitchell adjusted his green military dress uniform and reviewed his meticulously organized files one final time. Today, after weeks of covert investigation and careful documentation, the truth about Drill Sergeant Brent Gallagher's systematic discrimination would be exposed under the harsh overhead fluorescent lights. Gallagher strutted into the room wearing his crisp, short-sleeved drill instructor uniform, his chest puffed with misplaced confidence. His weathered face bore a smug expression as he surveyed the assembled officials, clearly believing his network of allies would protect him from any serious consequences. Corporal Derek Simmons followed close behind, fidgeting nervously in his orange duty shirt and regulation blue pants, his earlier bravado beginning to crack under the weight of the formal proceedings. Colonel Vivienne Marsh entered wearing her pressed red dress uniform, her silver hair pulled back in a regulation bun. As base commander, she had been kept deliberately unaware of the discrimination festering under her command, but today's revelations would shake her to her core. Captain Lydia Holt, the base medical officer whose intervention had saved Andre Mitchell from dangerous heat exhaustion, sat ready with her detailed medical reports that would prove crucial to the case. Marcus Mitchell called the hearing to order, his authoritative voice cutting through the morning air. "This formal inquiry will examine serious allegations of discrimination, abuse of authority, and conduct unbecoming against Drill Sergeant Brent Gallagher. All testimony will be recorded and may be used in subsequent legal proceedings." Gallagher leaned back in his chair with practiced arrogance. "General, sir, I've served this army for 15 years with distinction. Any complaints against me are just recruits who couldn't handle real military training. Some people aren't cut out for the warrior lifestyle, if you catch my meaning." The barely concealed racist undertone in Gallagher's words sent ripples of disgust through the room, but Marcus Mitchell maintained his professional composure. "We'll let the evidence speak for itself, Sergeant Gallagher." Marcus Mitchell opened his first file with deliberate precision. "Let's begin with Sergeant Owen Callahan's testimony and documentation." The veteran drill instructor entered wearing his regulation green shirt and navy blue trousers, carrying a thick folder that would demolish Gallagher's defense. Callahan cleared his throat and began his devastating account. "General, I've witnessed Drill Sergeant Gallagher systematically target Private Andre Mitchell and other black recruits with excessive punishment, impossible standards, and verbal abuse disguised as motivation. I documented 17 separate incidents over 6 weeks where Mitchell received harsher treatment than white recruits for identical or superior performance." Gallagher's confidence began to waver as Callahan presented detailed logs, timestamps, and even audio recordings captured during training exercises. The recordings played through the room's speakers, Gallagher's voice clearly heard assigning Andre Mitchell disproportionate punishments and making coded references to his background and natural limitations. "This is taken out of context," Gallagher protested, sweat beading on his forehead despite the air conditioning. "I push all my recruits hard. That's what makes soldiers." Marcus Mitchell's jaw tightened as he presented the next piece of evidence. Then explain why Private Mitchell was forced to carry 30% heavier packs than other recruits of similar physical stature. Explain why he received half the water breaks during desert training exercises. Captain Holt stepped forward with her medical files. General, my examination of Private Mitchell after his heat exhaustion incident revealed clear signs of dehydration and exhaustion consistent with inadequate hydration and excessive physical demands. When I attempted to provide medical attention, Sergeant Gallagher insisted the recruit was malingering. The evidence mounted systematically, each piece building an unassailable case against Gallagher's discriminatory practices. Lieutenant Naomi Fletcher, the base legal counsel, presented witness statements from multiple recruits describing a pattern of racial bias that extended far beyond Andre Mitchell's individual experience. Colonel Marsh's face grew increasingly pale as she realized the extent of discrimination occurring under her command. General Mitchell, I had no knowledge of these systematic abuses. If I had been aware— That's precisely the problem, Colonel, Marcus Mitchell replied firmly. This discrimination was hidden behind coded language and traditional military hierarchy, making it nearly invisible to standard oversight. The moment everyone had been anticipating arrived when Private Andre Mitchell entered the hearing room. He wore his dress green uniform with quiet dignity, his muscular physique and confident bearing a testament to his resilience despite months of abuse. The young soldier's dark skin glistened slightly under the bright overhead lights as he took his seat, ready to face his tormentor directly. Andre Mitchell's testimony began quietly, but gained strength with each word. General, sir, I joined the military to serve my country and prove myself as a soldier. From my first day under Sergeant Gallagher's command, I was treated differently than my white counterparts. The excessive punishment, the impossible standards, the constant implications that I didn't belong here because of my race. Gallagher interrupted with desperate anger. That boy is lying, General. I treated him exactly like every other recruit. If he couldn't handle the training, that's not my fault. Andre Mitchell continued with remarkable composure. Sir, I wasn't asking for special treatment. I was asking for equal treatment. When I excelled at marksmanship, I received extra kitchen duty. When I finished obstacle courses faster than others, I was forced to repeat them until exhaustion. The message was clear that no matter how well I performed, I would never be good enough in Sergeant Gallagher's eyes because of my skin color. The emotional weight of Andre Mitchell's testimony filled the room like a physical presence. Private Elijah Santos entered next, his training shirt and blue pants wrinkled from nervous perspiration. Despite his obvious fear of retaliation, Santos courageously corroborated every detail of Andre Mitchell's account. General, sir, I witnessed Sergeant Gallagher's treatment of Private Mitchell daily. The discrimination was obvious to all us recruits, but we were too scared to speak up. The hostile environment made it clear that anyone who supported Mitchell would become a target themselves. More recruits followed, their testimonies painting a comprehensive picture of institutional racism that had infected the training environment. Each account chipped away at Gallagher's remaining defenses, exposing the systematic nature of his discriminatory practices. Gallagher's composure finally cracked completely as he realized his career was ending in disgrace. His face reddened with rage as he abandoned all pretense of professionalism. You want to know the truth, General? Some people just don't belong in our military. This is supposed to be about maintaining standards, not lowering them for diversity quotas. I was trying to weed out the weak links before they got real soldiers killed in combat. The room fell silent at Gallagher's blatantly racist outburst. Colonel Marsh stared in horror at the drill sergeant she had trusted with training responsibilities. Corporal Simmons shifted uncomfortably, realizing his association with Gallagher had destroyed his own career prospects. Marcus Mitchell allowed the weight of Gallagher's words to settle before responding. Sergeant Gallagher, you have just provided the clearest evidence of racial animus and discriminatory intent that this hearing could possibly receive. Your own words condemn you more effectively than any outside testimony. But Marcus Mitchell wasn't finished. The moment had arrived for the revelation that would transform this administrative hearing into something far more personal and powerful. He stood slowly, his general's stars glinting under the fluorescent lights, and walked around the conference table until he stood directly behind Andre Mitchell's chair. "Sergeant Gallagher, there's something you should know about Private Andre Mitchell," Marcus Mitchell began, his voice carrying a new emotional undertone that hadn't been present during the clinical presentation of evidence. "This young man you've been systematically abusing, this soldier you've tried to break with your racist harassment, this recruit whose spirit you attempted to crush with your discriminatory treatment." The room held its collective breath as Marcus Mitchell placed a protective hand on Andre Mitchell's shoulder. "This is my younger brother." The silence that followed was absolute and devastating. Gallagher's face drained of all color as the full implications hit him like a physical blow. Colonel Marsh's eyes widened in shock. The other witnesses stared in amazement as the personal dimension of the investigation became clear. Andre Mitchell looked up at his older brother with tears in his eyes, finally understanding why the investigation had been so thorough and why justice had come so swiftly. The family bond that had driven Marcus Mitchell to pursue this case with relentless determination now stood revealed for all to see. Gallagher's voice came out as a strangled whisper. "Your brother, but you never said." "I didn't know." Marcus Mitchell's response cut through the air like a blade. "The fact that he's my brother is irrelevant to the charges against you, Sergeant. What matters is that he's an American soldier who deserved equal treatment and respect. What matters is that your discrimination violated every principle this military stands for. What matters is that you abused your authority to target a recruit based solely on the color of his skin." The general's voice rose with controlled fury. "But I'll tell you what his being my brother does mean, Sergeant Gallagher. It means I've seen firsthand the damage your racism inflicts on good soldiers. It means I understand personally the pain your discrimination causes military families. And it means I will dedicate every resource at my disposal to ensuring this never happens to another recruit under my command." Colonel Marsh found her voice at last. "General Mitchell, I am appalled by what has been revealed today. The systematic nature of this discrimination, the failure of oversight, the toxic environment that was allowed to fester. This represents a complete breakdown of leadership at multiple levels." Marcus Mitchell nodded gravely. "Colonel Marsh, this investigation has revealed institutional problems that extend far beyond one rogue drill sergeant. We'll be implementing comprehensive reforms to prevent future occurrences." Gallagher made one final desperate attempt to salvage something from the wreckage of his career. "General, sir, I've served faithfully for 15 years. Surely my record of service counts for something. I was just trying to maintain standards." Andre Mitchell stood slowly and faced his former tormentor directly. "Sergeant Gallagher, your 15 years of service don't give you the right to destroy other soldiers' dreams because of their race. Your experience doesn't excuse the hostile environment you created. Your rank didn't give you permission to abuse recruits who looked different than you." The young private's words carried more authority than any general's order. "I survived your harassment, and I excelled despite your discrimination. But how many other soldiers did you drive away from military service? How many careers did you destroy before they could begin? That's your real legacy, Sergeant." As the formal hearing concluded, the transformation in the room was palpable. Justice had been served, truth had been revealed, and a family bond had been honored. The reckoning was complete, but the real work of rebuilding and reform was just beginning. The morning sun cast sharp shadows across the Fort Braxton administrative building as General Marcus Mitchell walked through the corridors with purposeful strides. His green dress uniform was immaculate, the 2 silver stars on his shoulders catching the overhead fluorescent lights as he made his way to Colonel Vivienne Marsh's office. Today would mark the beginning of true justice for his brother Andre and countless other recruits who had suffered under Brent Gallagher's systematic discrimination. Colonel Marsh stood behind her mahogany desk, her red military blouse pressed to perfection, dark blue trousers crisp with fresh creases. Her face bore the weight of the past week's revelations, the evidence of institutional racism occurring under her command, having shaken her to the core. She saluted as Marcus entered, her movements sharp, but her expression troubled. "General Mitchell, the court-martial proceedings are scheduled to begin at 0900 hours, she reported, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "Drill Sergeant Gallagher has been confined to quarters pending the formal charges. The Judge Advocate General's office has reviewed all evidence and confirmed that the case will proceed on multiple counts." Marcus nodded, his jaw set with determination. Through the office window, he could see recruits moving across the parade ground in the bright daylight, their training continuing under the watchful eyes of properly supervised instructors. The base was already beginning to transform, but the real changes would come only after justice was served. "What about Corporal Simmons?" Marcus asked, his voice carrying the authority of years of military leadership. "Disciplinary action has been initiated," Marsh replied, opening a file folder on her desk. "He's facing charges of failure to report violations, enabling discriminatory conduct, and conduct prejudicial to good order and discipline. While his actions weren't as severe as Gallagher's, his complicity cannot be overlooked." The satisfaction that washed over Marcus was tempered by the knowledge of how much damage had been done before this moment arrived. He thought of Andre, who had endured weeks of psychological and physical abuse simply because of the color of his skin. The systemic nature of the discrimination had created an environment where hatred could flourish unchecked. At the military courthouse, a stone building with tall windows that allowed natural light to flood the proceedings, Drill Sergeant Brent Gallagher sat at the defendant's table wearing his dress uniform for what would likely be the last time. His short-sleeved shirt was regulation perfect, but his face showed the strain of a man whose career was crumbling around him. His military attorney whispered urgently in his ear, but Gallagher's expression remained defiant. The military judge, a stern woman with decades of experience, called the court to order. The charges were read aloud: discrimination based on race, abuse of authority, conduct unbecoming a non-commissioned officer, and violation of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. Each charge carried the weight of documented evidence, witness testimony, and recorded conversations that painted an undeniable picture of systematic racism. Lieutenant Naomi Fletcher, serving as prosecutor, stood to present the government's case. Her red blouse and dark blue dress pants were regulation perfect as she addressed the panel of officers who would determine Gallagher's fate. Her opening statement was precise and devastating, laying out a pattern of behavior that had created a hostile environment for black recruits while showing preferential treatment to white soldiers. "The evidence will show that Drill Sergeant Gallagher used his position of authority to systematically target and abuse recruits based solely on their race," Fletcher declared, her voice carrying across the courtroom. "This wasn't tough training or military discipline. This was discrimination, pure and simple, designed to break down soldiers who had volunteered to serve their country." In the gallery, Andre Mitchell sat in his dress uniform, his green blouse and blue trousers immaculate, his posture straight and proud, despite everything he had endured. Next to him sat Private Elijah Santos, whose courage in speaking out had been instrumental in bringing the truth to light. Other recruits who had witnessed the abuse filled the remaining seats, their presence a powerful statement that discrimination would no longer be tolerated in silence. The prosecution methodically presented their evidence. Sergeant Owen Callahan took the stand, his weathered face serious as he detailed the documentation he had maintained of Gallagher's discriminatory actions. His testimony was precise and damning, describing incidents where black recruits were subjected to harsher treatment, longer work details, and psychological abuse designed to force them out of the military. "In my 22 years of service, "I've never seen such blatant disregard for the principles this military stands for," Callahan testified, his voice carrying the weight of his experience. What Drill Sergeant Gallagher did wasn't training, it was persecution. When Andre took the stand, the courtroom fell silent. His testimony was powerful and emotional, describing the psychological impact of being singled out and targeted day after day. He spoke of the doubt that Gallagher's treatment had created, the way it had made him question whether he belonged in the military, whether he was worthy of wearing the uniform he had dreamed of earning since childhood. "I joined the army to serve my country," Andre said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Instead, I found myself fighting a different battle entirely, not against foreign enemies, but against the very system I had volunteered to be part of. Drill Sergeant Gallagher didn't just try to break my body with excessive punishment. He tried to break my spirit by making me believe I was less than human." The defense attorney's attempt to portray Gallagher's actions as legitimate training fell flat against the overwhelming evidence. Audio recordings played in the courtroom captured Gallagher's coded racist language, his deliberate targeting of black recruits, and his explicit statements about their supposed unsuitability for military service. The recordings were damning, leaving no room for alternative interpretations. Gallagher himself took the stand in a desperate attempt to save his career, but his testimony only made matters worse. Under cross-examination, his true beliefs emerged, and the racist attitudes that had driven his behavior became impossible to deny. His claims of treating all recruits equally crumbled under the weight of documented evidence and witness testimony. The military panel deliberated for less than 2 hours before returning with their verdict: guilty on all charges. The satisfaction that filled the courtroom was palpable as justice was finally served. Gallagher's face went white as the judge announced his punishment: reduction in rank, forfeiture of all pay and allowances, confinement, and dismissal from the service with a dishonorable discharge. Corporal Derek Simmons faced his own military justice proceedings the following day. His punishment was less severe, but still career-ending: reduction in rank, loss of pay, and administrative separation from the Army. His failure to report the discrimination and his active participation in creating a hostile environment had consequences that would follow him for the rest of his life. But the real transformation began with the recognition of those who had stood up for what was right. In a ceremony held on the parade ground under bright afternoon sunlight, Colonel Marsh presented commendations to the soldiers whose courage had exposed the discrimination and brought about change. Sergeant Owen Callahan received a promotion to staff sergeant, his integrity and dedication to proper military standards finally receiving the recognition they deserved. His new rank came with assignment to the base's new oversight committee, where his experience would help prevent future abuses. Private Elijah Santos stood at attention as he received the Army Commendation Medal for his courage in speaking out against injustice. His green dress uniform was perfectly pressed, his pride evident as the citation was read aloud. His willingness to risk retaliation by testifying had helped save not only Andre, but countless future recruits who would serve in an environment free from discrimination. Andre Mitchell received special recognition for his resilience and exemplary performance under adversity. Despite the harassment and abuse he had endured, his training scores ranked among the highest in his class. His dedication to excellence, even in the face of systematic discrimination, exemplified the best qualities of military service. Colonel Marsh announced sweeping reforms that would transform the culture at Fort Braxton. Comprehensive anti-discrimination training would become mandatory for all personnel, with regular refresher sessions to ensure the message remained clear. New oversight protocols would monitor recruit treatment, with multiple reporting channels for soldiers to raise concerns without fear of retaliation. A new position was created, Equal Opportunity Advisor, with direct reporting authority to the base commander. This officer would have the power to investigate complaints, recommend disciplinary action, and ensure that the principles of equal treatment were more than just words in a manual. The investigation had revealed systemic issues beyond Gallagher's individual actions. Training protocols were revised to ensure consistent standards applied to all recruits regardless of race. Random inspections would monitor drill instructor behavior, and recruit feedback would be regularly collected and reviewed by senior leadership. As the official ceremonies concluded, Marcus and Andre found themselves alone in a small conference room in the administrative building. The overhead fluorescent lights illuminated two brothers who had weathered a storm that had tested their faith in justice and the military they both served. "I'm sorry you had to go through that alone," Marcus said, his voice heavy with emotion. "I wanted to intervene sooner, but I knew that for real change to happen, everything had to be done by the book." Andre nodded, understanding the difficult position his brother had been in. "You did the right thing. If you had stepped in too early, they would have said it was just family favoritism. This way no one can question that justice was served based on the evidence." The conversation that followed was cathartic for both brothers. They talked about the fear Andre had felt, not just of the physical punishment, but of the psychological warfare Gallagher had waged against his sense of self-worth. They discussed the strength it had taken to continue performing at a high level while being systematically targeted and demoralized. Marcus shared his own struggle with maintaining professional objectivity while watching his younger brother suffer. The investigation had required him to document and observe abuse that went against every protective instinct he felt as an older brother. But that professional restraint had been necessary to ensure that when justice came, it would be complete and unquestionable. The base buzzed with news of the changes as word spread through the ranks. Recruits who had witnessed the discrimination felt validated that their experiences had been taken seriously. The message was clear. Discrimination would not be tolerated, and those who engaged in it would face severe consequences. Young soldiers of all backgrounds began to see Fort Braxton as a place where merit truly determined advancement, where the content of their character and the quality of their service mattered more than the color of their skin. The transformation was already visible in the way recruits interacted with each other and their instructors. As evening approached and the last light of day filtered through the conference room windows, Marcus and Andre knew that this chapter of their lives was closing, but its impact would be felt for years to come. The military justice system had worked as designed, proving that even in institutions with long histories of discrimination, change was possible when people of courage stood up for what was right. The reforms implemented at Fort Braxton would serve as a model for other military installations, spreading the changes far beyond the boundaries of a single base. Justice had been served, but more importantly, a foundation had been laid for a future where all who chose to serve could do so with dignity and respect. 6 months had passed since the reckoning that shook Fort Braxton to its core. The morning sun cast brilliant rays across the parade ground as hundreds of family members filled the bleachers for the graduation ceremony. The overhead fluorescent lights in the assembly hall mixed with natural skylight streaming through massive windows, illuminating a scene of triumph that few could have imagined half a year ago. Private Andre Mitchell stood at attention in the front row, his dress uniform immaculate, his posture perfect. The young man who had once endured endless push-ups while others rested now wore the gold cord of class valedictorian across his chest. His muscular frame, forged through trials that went far beyond standard training, commanded respect from every person in the formation. In the VIP section, General Marcus Mitchell sat in his decorated dress uniform, flanked by their parents and extended family. Their mother dabbed tears from her eyes as she watched her youngest son prepare to receive honors that represented so much more than academic achievement. Marcus Mitchell's chest swelled with pride that transcended his role as a general. Today, he was simply a brother, watching his family's warrior claim his rightful place. Colonel Vivienne Marsh approached the podium, her red dress uniform reflecting the dramatic changes she had implemented across the base. The woman who had once been unaware of the systematic discrimination occurring under her command now stood as a champion of reform. Her voice carried across the assembly with newfound authority and purpose. Today marks not just the graduation of exceptional soldiers, but the culmination of transformation, Colonel Marsh announced. 6 months ago, this institution faced a mirror that showed us uncomfortable truths. We chose to confront those truths rather than hide from them, and the result stands before you today. She gestured toward the graduating class, her eyes finding Andre Mitchell among the distinguished ranks. These soldiers represent the highest ideals of our military. They have earned their place through merit, dedication, and unwavering commitment to excellence. Nothing else determined their success. Nothing else ever will again. Private Elijah Santos stood 3 positions down from Andre Mitchell, his own achievements reflecting the supportive environment that had replaced the toxic culture of fear. The friendship forged in those dark early days had strengthened both men, creating a bond that would last throughout their military careers. Elijah's green dress uniform displayed ribbons for leadership and community service, recognizing his courage in speaking truth to power when it mattered most. Captain Lydia Holt observed from the medical staff section, her red officer's uniform marking her elevated role in the new Fort Braxton hierarchy. The protocols she had developed following Andre Mitchell's heat exhaustion incident had become standard across multiple military installations. Her medical interventions had literally saved lives and careers, transforming how the military approached recruit safety and well-being. As Colonel Marsh called Andre Mitchell's name for individual recognition, the applause that erupted transcended polite ceremony. Soldiers, officers, and family members rose in genuine appreciation for a young man whose resilience had catalyzed institutional change. Andre Mitchell marched forward with confidence that radiated from every step, his bearing reflecting not just military training, but personal victory over forces designed to break him. Private Andre Mitchell, Colonel Marsh announced, graduating first in his class with distinctions in leadership, physical fitness, and tactical excellence. His assignment to the 82nd Airborne Division represents the beginning of what promises to be an exemplary military career. The elite unit assignment had been based purely on merit, evaluated by officers who knew nothing of Andre Mitchell's previous struggles. His performance scores, leadership evaluations, and peer assessments had earned him placement in one of the military's most prestigious divisions. The dreams that Drill Sergeant Brent Gallagher had tried to destroy were not just intact, but exceeded. General Marcus Mitchell stood with the crowd, his decorated chest rising with emotion he rarely allowed himself to display publicly. Watching his brother receive recognition that had been earned through both excellence and endurance triggered memories of their childhood promises to protect each other. Today, they had both fulfilled those promises in ways they never could have imagined. Sergeant Owen Callahan, now promoted to the Training Oversight Department, supervised the ceremony from his new position of authority. His decision to document and report discrimination had not only saved Andre Mitchell, but had protected countless future recruits. The integrity that had driven him to act despite personal risk now served as the foundation for the new training protocols, bearing his name alongside the Mitchell Protocol. Lieutenant Naomi Fletcher handled legal affairs from her upgraded office, ensuring that every policy change met the highest standards of constitutional protection. Her legal framework had not just punished wrongdoing, but had created sustainable systems preventing future abuse. The comprehensive reforms she had drafted were being studied and implemented at military installations across the nation. Meanwhile, former Drill Sergeant Brent Gallagher faced his own reckoning in civilian criminal court. The man who had wielded unchecked authority over vulnerable recruits now stood as a defendant, his military career permanently ended and his future uncertain. The discrimination charges had been followed by additional revelations about his conduct, ensuring that his ability to harm others had been permanently terminated. Corporal Derek Simmons had been transferred to a non-training position After disciplinary action, his career trajectory permanently altered by his choice to enable rather than report abuse. The consequences served as a clear message throughout the military hierarchy that passive participation in discrimination carried serious professional penalties. As the ceremony continued, Andre Mitchell reflected on the transformation surrounding him. The same parade ground where he had once been forced into excessive punishment now hosted celebration of his achievements. The institution that had once seemed designed to destroy him had evolved into an environment where his talents could flourish without artificial barriers. Major Theodore Banks delivered remarks about the new culture of accountability that now characterized Fort Braxton. His integrity office had expanded its mandate and resources, creating multiple reporting channels and protective measures for soldiers facing discrimination. The systemic changes went far beyond addressing individual bad actors to fundamentally altering how power was exercised and monitored. The graduation concluded with the traditional military formations and ceremonial presentations, but the real ceremony occurred during the family reception that followed. General Marcus Mitchell found his brother in the crowd of well-wishers and proud relatives, both men stepping away for a private moment that had been months in the making. "You did it," Marcus Mitchell said simply, his voice carrying weight that encompassed far more than graduation achievements. Andre Mitchell nodded, his expression reflecting both gratitude and determination. "We did it. All of us who refused to accept that discrimination was just part of military life." They stood in comfortable silence, two brothers who had fought different aspects of the same battle and emerged victorious. The institution they both served had been strengthened by confronting its flaws rather than hiding them. Around them, the new Fort Braxton continued its mission with renewed purpose. Recruits of all backgrounds trained under fair standards and clear expectations. Officers led with accountability and oversight. The culture of fear had been replaced by an environment where excellence flourished regardless of race or background. As families departed and soldiers prepared for their next assignments, Andre Mitchell took one final look at the base that had tested him beyond normal limits. Tomorrow, he would report to Fort Bragg to begin his service with the 82nd Airborne Division. The challenges ahead would be significant, but they would be based on military necessity rather than racial prejudice. The transformation was complete, but its impact would resonate for generations of soldiers who would serve in an institution strengthened by its willingness to confront and correct injustice. You just heard a story that history tried to overlook. If it stayed with you, take a second to stand with it. Subscribe, share, and help us keep telling the stories that deserve light, not silence.